Ever get that feeling like you're buzzing with energy, even
Mhm.
just sitting still? It's like this invisible symphony going on inside of us. Life process is just chugging along. It's kind of mind-blowing.
It really is. It's like a bustling city, but like microscopic. Molecules, reactions, constantly building and changing. It's really the core of what makes something alive.
Which makes you wonder, how do scientists actually define life? Like, what's the difference between a rock and a tree? Or, a robot and a human?
Oh, that is a question that's been debated for centuries. The simplest way to put it is, life is defined by a set of processes that maintain order, prevent things from just breaking down at a molecular level, that is. It's like our body are constantly fighting this tendency towards disorder, entropy. We need energy constantly and ways to manage it just to maintain all our complex structures and functions.
So it's more than just, like, moving or growing. It's this constant struggle to stay organized.
Precisely. And that's why viruses are such a fascinating case. They have genetic material, but they can't replicate on their own, can't carry out those life processes without a host cell to hijack. It really blurs the lines.
That's a great point. Like, they're in this in-between zone of living and not. So what are those essential processes, the ones that really define life?
Well, there are a few key players: nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion. These are the fundamental processes that allow organisms to, get energy, use it, move things around, and get rid of waste. Without them, no life as we know it.
Okay, so let's start with nutrition. It seems pretty obvious everything needs fuel, but I'm curious how different organisms actually get it.
Well, that's where things get really interesting. There are two main strategies: autotrophic and heterotrophic. Autotrophs, they're like the ultimate self-sufficient life forms. They can make their own food from simple inorganic substances using light or chemical energy.
Plants, right. Photosynthesis is their superpower.
Exactly. They've cracked the code on capturing light energy from the sun and turning it into chemical energy in the form of sugars. It's insanely complex, but super efficient, and it basically fuels almost all life on Earth.
So how does it actually work? I mean, I learned about it in school, but it always seemed kind of magical.
The magic is in this special pigment called chlorophyll. It's in plant cells. And these chlorophyll molecules, they absorb light energy, which then powers a whole series of reactions, splitting water molecules, converting carbon dioxide into glucose. It's like a tiny solar-powered factory.
Okay, starting to come back to me now. So plants take in carbon dioxide, water, sunlight. They produce glucose, their food. But what about oxygen?
Yes, oxygen. That's a byproduct of photosynthesis, released into the atmosphere, and that's what we breathe. Talk about a win-win situation.
It's incredible how interconnected it all is. So plants are the self-feeders, the autotrophs. What about, well, the rest of us?
That's where heterotrophs come in. We rely on consuming other organisms, plants or other animals, to get the complex organic molecules we need for energy and to build our own bodies.
So we're basically borrowing the energy that plants captured from the sun.
Precisely. We can't just make glucose from scratch. Got to get it from somewhere. Whether you're a herbivore munching leaves, carnivore chasing prey, or, us omnivores enjoying a balanced meal, we all depend on the energy that was originally captured by those awesome autotrophs.
It's wild to think about the whole food chain.
Yeah.
How energy flows through the ecosystem. So we've covered how organisms get to their fuel, but how do they actually extract the energy from it? Like, use it?
Well, that's where respiration comes in, breaking down those complex organic molecules like glucose and releasing energy that the cells can actually use.
Okay, but how does, like, eating a salad turn into the energy I need to run a marathon? Or, write a brilliant screenplay?
Great question. The key is this molecule called ATP. Adenosine triphosphate. Think of it like the energy currency of the cell. Respiration is all about converting the chemical energy in food into the usable energy stored in ATP molecules.
So ATP is like the tiny battery powering everything.
Exactly. And there are two main types of respiration: aerobic and anaerobic. Aerobic respiration needs oxygen, and it's the most efficient way to make ATP. This all happens in these specialized organelles called mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell.
Mitochondria. Heard
Yep.
of those. What about anaerobic respiration? When did that happen?
Anaerobic respiration kicks in when oxygen is limited, like during intense exercise, for example. Your muscles might not be getting enough oxygen to keep up with the ATP demand through aerobic respiration. So they switch to anaerobic, which is faster but less efficient, and it produces lactic acid as a byproduct.
So that's why muscles burn when you push too hard.
Yeah.
Lactic acid buildup, telling you need more oxygen.
Precisely. Your body's way of saying, hey, slow down. Gotta catch my breath.
Anaerobic is great for short bursts, but aerobic respiration is the real workhorse for most of our bodily functions.
So we've got nutrition, how organisms get the energy. Respiration, how they release that energy. But how do they get those nutrients and energy where they need to go? Our bodies are trillions of cells, got to be a complex delivery system.
Absolutely right. And that's where transportation comes in. Just like a city needs roads and trucks, our bodies need a way to move stuff around. Oxygen, nutrients, waste products, all that jazz.
And in humans, that's the circulatory system, right? The heart's the pump, and the blood vessels are the highways.
Spot on. The human circulatory system is a marvel. Our heart is this powerful four-chambered pump keeping blood flowing throughout the body, delivering oxygen, nutrients, and taking away waste.
I've always been fascinated by the heart. Non-stop beating, our whole lives. Amazing. Truly. And those four chambers, that's crucial for separating oxygen-rich blood from the oxygen-poor blood, making sure the most oxygenated blood goes where it's needed most. Brain, muscles,
Like a fine-tuned delivery service, making sure everything gets where it's supposed to be. What about the blood vessels themselves? They're not just simple tubes, right?
You're right, they're not. Different types, each with their own job. Arteries, those have thick muscular walls carrying blood away from the heart under high pressure. Then you have veins, thinner walls with valves to prevent backflow, carrying blood back to the heart. And then there are capillaries, the tiniest blood vessels. That's where the actual exchange happens between the blood and the tissues around it.
It's wild to think about all those components working together just to keep us going. What about plants, though? No heart, so how do they transport water and nutrients?
Fantastic question. Takes us to the world of plant transport systems. They have their own way of moving things around, relying on two special tissues, xylem and phloem.
Vaguely remember those from biology class. Xylem? That was something to do with water, right?
You got it. Xylem is responsible for transporting water and dissolved minerals upwards from the roots to the rest of the plant, like a network of tiny pipes.
And phloem was sugars, I think.
Exactly. Phloem carries the sugars produced during photosynthesis, from the leaves to the rest of the plant. Roots, stems, flowers, fruits, like the plant's own personal food delivery service.
So even without a heart, plants have a pretty efficient way to move things around.
Oh, they definitely do. And one of the coolest parts is transpiration. That's the evaporation of water from the leaves, and that creates this pulling force, drawing water up through the xylem all the way from the roots.
So the plant is using evaporation to move water against gravity. That's incredible. Nature's built-in pump.
It is, and it's crucial for the plant to survive. Helps regulate temperature, transport nutrients, and keeps everything rigid.
This is all so fascinating. Okay, so we've got nutrition, restoration, transportation. 3 down, 1 to go. What about excretion?
Excretion. That's all about getting rid of waste products. Just like a city needs a good waste management system, our bodies need to remove the byproducts of all those metabolic processes. Otherwise, things would get toxic fast.
Taking out the trash, but for our bodies. But before we dive into the details of that, how about a quick recap of what we've learned so far?
Great idea. We've covered a lot.
So we started by defining life, that set of processes that maintain order, prevent things from breaking down. Then we explored nutrition, how organisms obtain fuel. We talked about autotrophs, like plants that make their own food through photosynthesis, and heterotrophs, like animals that need to consume other organisms.
Right. And we delved into respiration, breaking down those complex molecules to release energy, ATP. That powers everything. Talked about aerobic versus anaerobic respiration and how they play different roles.
Then we moved on to transportation, the systems that move everything around the body. We looked at the human circulatory system with the powerful heart, the network of blood vessels, and we learned how plants transport things using xylem and phloem.
Quite a journey through the fundamentals of life.
And now we're ready to tackle excretion, that essential waste removal process.
I'm ready when you are.
Let's do it.
All right, let's talk trash. Well, how our bodies get rid of it, at least. In humans, that's the excretory system's job, filtering out those waste products from the blood, getting them out of there.
And the kidneys are the stars of this show, right? Always pictured them as these little bean-shaped filters working away.
That's a great way to think about it. Kidneys are like super efficient filtration machines, packed with millions of these tiny filtering units called nephrons. Each one's like its own mini processing plant, filtering the blood, producing urine.
Okay, break it down for me. How do these little filtration plants actually work? How do they know what to keep, what to toss?
It all starts with filtration. Blood enters each nephron through this cluster of tiny blood vessels, the glomerulus. And the walls of the glomerulus act like a sieve. Let the small stuff through water, salts, glucose, urea, but hold back the bigger molecules, proteins, blood cells.
So, first pass filter, separating the maybe useful from the definitely not, then what?
Right. That filtered fluid, we call it filtrate, it travels through a bunch of tubules within the nephron. And here's where it gets interesting. As the filtrate moves through these tubules, the good stuff gets reabsorbed back into the bloodstream. Glucose, amino acids, most of the water.
Like a recycling center, making sure we don't lose valuable stuff. It's incredible how much is going on at such a tiny scale.
It really is. And while that's happening, the waste products, like urea, they become more concentrated in what's left behind, which is what we know as urine.
So it's this balance, right? Reclaiming what we need, concentrating the waste to get rid of it, maintaining that internal equilibrium. But how does our body K on OW, how much to reabsorb, how much to excrete? Seems pretty important to get that right.
Absolutely. That's where hormones come in. Hormones like antidiuretic hormone, ADH, and aldosterone, they regulate the reabsorption of water and salts, making sure our bodies keep that right balance of fluids and electrolytes.
Electrolytes. Term I hear a lot, but not sure I fully get it.
Great question. Electrolytes are basically minerals that carry an electric charge when they're dissolved in fluids, like blood. They're essential for tons of bodily functions, nerve impulses, muscle contractions, maintaining that proper fluid balance we were talking about.
So when we talk about hydration, replenishing electrolytes, it's really about keeping those minerals in the right balance.
Exactly. It's all about maintaining the right concentration of those electrolytes to keep everything running smoothly.
Makes me think about sports drinks, all that talk about electrolytes. Are they actually that important?
Well, for most people, if you're staying hydrated, eating a balanced diet, no need to go crazy with electrolyte supplements. But for athletes, people sweating a lot, they're losing electrolytes in their sweat, so replenishing those can be important to maintain performance, prevent cramping.
So it depends on the situation, individual needs. Makes sense. Back to the kidneys, though. They filter the blood, produce urine. What happens to that urine once it's made?
Well, it travels from the kidneys through these tubes called ureters to the bladder. That's where it's stored until, we're ready to get rid of it.
The bladder's like the holding tank.
Exactly. And when it gets full, signals are sent to the brain, letting us know it's time to find a restroom.
Amazing how it all works together. We've talked about the human system in detail. What about plants, though? No kidneys, no bladder. How do they get rid of waste?
Plants have their own methods, equally clever. One way is just storing waste in their leaves, which eventually fall off. Nature's built-in composting.
Like shedding old baggage, literally.
What?
What other strategies do they have?
Some plants store waste as resins and gums, often in that old xylem tissue. Think of that sticky sap that oozes out of pine trees, for instance. That's often a mix of resins and waste products.
So, sealing off the unwanted stuff. Ingenious. Anything else?
Yep, some plants can actually release waste products into the soil around them, contributing to the ecosystem, getting rid of things they don't need.
Everything's connected, huh? So to recap, plants can shed waste through leaves, store it as resins, or release it into the soil. Pretty diverse for not having those complex systems we see in animals.
Absolutely. Shows how life finds a way. It's remarkable, the diversity out there.
Okay, so we've covered a ton, from tiny nephrons to, plants shedding their waste like autumn leaves. It's amazing how life has so many ways of doing this essential things.
It really is. It shows you in biology there's rarely one right answer. Evolution has come up with so many solutions to the problem of, staying alive.
Makes me think back to what you're saying about viruses and how they're kind of in between living and non-living. If life is about these processes, does that mean viruses are trying to, evolve to be more alive?
Ooh, now that is a fascinating question. Gets to the core of how we understand evolution, really. Viruses, they are always changing, but it's not necessarily towards being more like, say, cellular life. Their goal, if you can call it that, is to replicate effectively. Sometimes that means being better at using host cells. Sometimes it's being better at spreading.
So less about some perfect form of life, more about what works in their environment, right?
Exactly. And that environment includes us, the hosts they infect. Think about it. If a virus is too deadly, it kills the host before it can spread. So there's this pressure pushing towards viruses that can replicate and transmit without wiping everyone out.
Makes sense. It's like an arms race, the virus versus our immune system.
Precisely. And that's why we see such a range in viruses, right? Some, like the common cold, pretty mild symptoms. Others, like Ebola, incredibly lethal. It all comes down to those specific interactions, virus and host.
This reminds me, we talked about how efficient plants are, converting sunlight to energy. I read somewhere scientists are trying to copy that photosynthesis to make renewable energy. Is that even possible?
Oh, it's definitely a hot area of research. The trick is plants have had billions of years to evolve this amazingly complex and efficient machinery. Even getting close to that level of efficiency would be revolutionary for renewable energy.
Imagine harnessing the power of the sun to create fuel, just like plants.
Exactly. And that's why studying these basic life processes is so important. We learn from nature, and then we can use that knowledge to solve problems.
My mind is officially blown for this episode. We covered so much, and honestly, it's changed how I think about being alive.
It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. It's easy to forget how complex these things are. Breathing, eating,
Uh,
they're incredibly intricate processes.
and happening inside us right now, that's just wild.
It truly is. So next time you take a breath or eat something or feel your heart beating, take a second to appreciate that amazing symphony of life going on, keeping you going.
Great reminder. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into, well, life itself.
Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those life processes humming.